I love it. That was awesome. Stephen, thank you so much for those kind words. They do things a little bit different in Jersey, though. Like Sunday afternoon? What are we talking about? Why don't you have Pop Warner games on Sunday afternoon? I don't know. It's kind of weird. Jersey, I lived there when I played for the Jets. That didn't go real well. Oh, that's funny? Let's talk about your worst years. Oh my gosh, it's such an honor to be here. Thank y'all for supporting the Touchdown Club here. Thank you so much for having me. I love it. I love hearing that over $3 million have gone to be able to support so many youth sports. You know, I love the impact that it makes because you ultimately have no idea. For the Carolinas and Hickory Tavern, and especially Dream on 3 for what you guys do for making so many dreams come true for people. And for the families that are here, Stephen, you had an awesome introduction, but I feel like they need to stand up. All right. You know, and I also love getting to honor all of our military servicemen and women. But when you stand up, we can't see them. So when they stand up, I feel like they should stand up again, but you got to stay seated, but just clap really loud so we can actually see them. So guys, can you guys actually stand up this time and we can see you? Thank you guys. And I got to give a shout out to one of the best teammates and best linebackers, honestly, in my opinion, to ever play. And if you ever got hit by him, you would know why. So Brandon already got introduced, but Brandon, you got to stand up, show off your hat. I'm not exaggerating. So me and Brandon were recruits together, and we were visiting a bunch of different places, and we were on the sidelines at Alabama, and we're standing beside each other. I believe Percy was there that week too, and Carl Johnson, a few other guys, and so we're like standing beside each other, and I knew about Brandon, plus I'm like, dang, that dude is a linebacker. And so we start talking, and you were like, you know, where are you thinking of going? And he's like, I don't know, Florida, Alabama, LSU. And he's like, where are you thinking about going? I'm like, Florida, Alabama, LSU. And he's like, oh, that to win a couple of championships. And ultimately, the four of us all went to Florida together, and we were able to win a couple of championships. And I knew he was special, but then day one, when he put on pads, and he's a freshman linebacker, and I'm just a freshman quarterback, and you have a lot of veterans. You know, you expect some of the veterans to push around freshmen. It's just reality. They're 22 and you're 17 or 18. I have never seen a freshman linebacker give so many offensive linemen concussions as he did day one. I'm also not exaggerating. I promise this happened. We would have to go to Brandon and say, we need them on Saturday. You can't do that. We don't have an offensive line that can play. Concussions for our team are bad. We never want anybody to get hurt. But you can hit LSU and FSU and Georgia as hard as you want. Dead serious. I'm not actually exaggerating. You think I'm just playing. We've had that conversation multiple times. Our strength coach, Mickey Barati, Urban would have to go in there in a scrimmage, and especially when, you know, he would kind of freak out a little bit every now and then, get really excited, and he would like put the ball down on the one, he'd be like, offense, defense, goal line. And he'd be like, do whatever you can to score. And he would point at Brandon and be like, do whatever you can to stop him. And we would be like, oh, 6 people are going to be in the training room. I would have had a lot of concussions after that practice too. And so it's just so cool that we have the chance to hang out. And there's so many amazing people I've had the chance to meet already this morning, and just so grateful to be here. You know, it's funny watching that highlight video that showed a lot of bad plays and a couple of good ones, but you know, one of the funny plays that's on there is against the New York Jets, and that was a crazy game. It was a Thursday night football game, and the Jets were actually good then, and I can say that I played for them, and we were not good. So I'm allowed to say that. But they were good, and we're both fighting to get to the playoffs, and that game was one of the most intense games I've ever played in, and it was back and forth, back and forth. They had such a good defense that was, you saw Darrell Revis, Cromartie, Bart Scott, so many great guys, and the game just goes back and forth the entire time, and they punt the ball down to us at our own 5-yard line. We have 95 yards to go. The game's on the line, but honestly, really the season is on the line, and that ended up being the case. If we don't win that game, we don't go to the playoffs. So the game's on the line, the season's on the line, and we have to go 95 yards, score a touchdown to win the game. And I'm someone that always takes a lot of pride in being as good a shape as possible. So when the fourth quarter gets there and some people flinch, I didn't want to. When some people hesitate, I didn't want to. When some people quit, I didn't want to. When lactic acid builds up in some people's lungs, I didn't want to feel that. I could barely breathe. I played so hard and I was so tired, and I knew we were going to go 2 minutes and we were going to spread it out. And so every play I'm fighting so hard for every foot, every inch, and we're moving the ball, but we're running out of time. And we're getting first downs, but I'm so exhausted that literally one time I come back to the offensive line, and instead of calling a different protection, I literally go, same play. Because I was so out of breath. And so we move the ball and get down to the 34. Jumps on the field and starts streaking across the field. And this is Thursday night. I believe NBC was on that channel that night. And obviously they don't want this naked dude running around on their television set, So they call it a TV timeout. And right when something, this would happen probably 3-4 times a year, honestly. Somebody, runs on the field and actually them, and they'll make a miss or whatever, and it's kind of funny. But instantly for me, I was just like, oh, thank you, Lord. Because I was just so exhausted. And so we go to the sideline, the Jets go to their sideline, and 3 minutes is that's a really long break. And so we're recovering and we're talking on the sidelines, and Coach Ryan, their head coach, who was a great defensive coach, and he did have a few tendencies. He would love to bring pressure, especially on sudden change. Anything that was, a turnover, change of quarter, change of half, anything that was a sudden change opportunity, I guess this was a different form of sudden change for that guy. But we were like, you think this in his mind counts as sudden change? Because he loves to blitz everybody. And we're like, let's take a chance. And he's probably going to blitz the house. And so we kind of designed that play sort of on the sidelines. And you just saw that I ran around the left edge for the game-winning touchdown. And a lot of fans, would say that guy jumped on the field because he had too much alcohol, which that could be the case. But you know what? I'm also someone that's always believed in divine intervention. And I don't know. But I will say, I am someone that believes in divine intervention. And man, I think we're here for a reason. And hopefully it's more than just to hear a story or two about sports, but maybe it's ultimately how we can all impact more lives together. And ultimately to be inspired of all the lives that you have impacted and you're going to impact, not just through sports, but how sports can also impact so many people. And I think God has used sports in my life to impact my lives in so many different ways. I love thinking about all the different ways that sports in a game has been able to change my life. One of the ways that is very clear to me is in willingness. You see, in sports, you got to be willing. You say, what do you mean? And a lot of people would say determination, toughness, work ethic, and all those things are true. But ultimately, I think it comes down to, are you really willing or are you not? For me, I remember when I was in Pop Warner, and we had an awesome Pop Warner team, and we were thinking that we were going to win the national championship on Pop Warner, and we were in a big game in the semifinals, and I was running with the ball, and I had the ball out like this because I thought I was really cool. I thought that's how really cool guys like Fred Taylor and all of them ran with the ball. And I wasn't willing to listen to my coaches to hold it really high and tight and someone came from behind and tipped it, and it literally rolled out of my grasp and landed on the 2-yard line going in, where we would have scored to tie the game and probably ended up winning the national championship on Pop Warner. But for me, I wanted to be cool versus being willing to listen to my coaches. For us, when we look at our time at Florida, I think one of the differences between us and a lot of other people that had a whole lot of talent, a whole lot of ability, a whole lot of first rounders, was a willingness to embrace the grind, a willingness to embrace the suck, a willingness to embrace it when it gets really, really, really hard and difficult. And I think that's one thing that sports teaches you. And that also I think every one of us can learn, and what we're called to do in life is, do you really actually embrace it when it's hard or just when it's easy? I remember when I was an 8th grader and I had the chance to go play varsity leading into my freshman year, and I get pulled onto the varsity team. It's been something I've dreamed of literally like my whole life. You're like, dang, I get to be on the varsity team, and I'm so excited. And one of my brothers was gonna be a senior that year, and before the year started, at the end of the summer, right about now, our whole team went to something called the Burly Man Retreat. I mean, it's about as meathead as you can get, right? It's literally called a Burly Man Retreat. But our whole team goes to this retreat, and Coach, you would have loved it. It was tug of war, and it was wood chopping, and it was sprints, and all these random, whatever they thought were Burly Man activities. And so our team's competing against all these other teams, and it's all these competitions, and it's supposed to bring camaraderie amongst your team. And so, we're having so much fun in this competition, and teams coming together. And then the last night, the last competition, is a room a little bit bigger than this, except it smells terrible because it's all these high schoolers in it. And there's all these teams. And they said, all right, last competition. Each one of the teams, you do it as many times as possible. And whoever does that wins. And so, I'm an 8th grader, about to be a 9th grader. I'm looking around, who's our team gonna pick, right? Like, this is awesome. Like, we better win. I'm looking around, and they look back at me. Like, what are you looking at? You pick a senior or something. I'm not doing that. And they pick me, say, you do it. And I was like, oh no. It's not that I wanted to shy away from competition. It's just that I'm representing something on a whole nother level. Something I've dreamed of, and I just didn't necessarily feel ready for the moment. And you would think, it's a silly Burly Man retreat. Not to you when you've dreamed of it your whole life, and now you're finally competing with your brother and a team that you've looked forward to playing for your whole life. And so they picked me, and I was like, oh no. So I'm walking up to the stage, and the whole line is going this way. So the first person's like right here, and there's a line going that way. And as a competitor, it's like, I'm not going first. I'm gonna go last because I wanna know what I have to beat. So I literally walk all the way to the end of the line, except there's a guy standing against the wall, so no one can actually get behind him. And he's the defensive tackle at a 6A high school where we're from. And he had won a couple other individual state titles in a couple other sports, and he's the defensive tackle, and he's jacked, and he's strong. And I was like, oh crap. For sure, 100%, this dude is stronger than me, and it's not even close. So I'm standing right in front of him, because at least I can't be last, I'll be second to last, And I see what everybody's done, and I was like, okay, I know I can beat those. I know I can beat those. So I get up there, and I'm motivated, I'm encouraged, and so I start going, and I think the number was like maybe 60 or 70 that someone had done, and I'm able to beat that, and I get to 100, and I get to 150, and I'm looking at my team over here that I'm just now getting a chance to be a part of, and they're cheering, and they're going crazy, and they're so hyping you up. You see, at first I was doing it not to be embarrassed or let my team down, but later on I was doing it because I was inspired to come through for my team. You see, it's one thing to be encouraged, which means to give support, confidence, and hope too. It's a great thing. But to me, it's not as strong as inspire or inspiration, because that actually means to fill someone with the urge to do something. And watching my teammates, were filled with the urge to do whatever I possibly could to come through for them. Because curling matters? No. because they matter. And that's one thing that sports teaches you is, man, that camaraderie, that togetherness, that brotherhood matters. And I want to do anything I possibly can to come through for them. And so I keep going. I get to 200, and I get to 250, and I get to 300, and I get to 305, and I get to 310, and I get to 315, and I literally get in like a full body cramp, and I actually, they literally like take the weight, and I can't move my arms anymore, and I actually partially did damage to both of my arms, and maybe that's why my throwing motion wasn't good enough, Brandon, I don't know. And so they literally start giving me IVs, and they take me over to see the doctors and the nurses, and so I don't get to see the rest of the competition. But the guy behind me comes up, and I don't learn this till the next morning. The guy behind me comes up, defensive tackle, 6A, state champion, picks up the bar, starts doing it, gets to enough to be second, puts it down, puts his foot on it, and goes, ugh, it ain't worth it. And to him, it wasn't. But what do you think his teammates were thinking? What do you think in that moment his teammates were thinking? Okay, is curling really important? No, but what about when we get into the second half or the fourth quarter, or your knee's a little sore, or you're playing with a torn shoulder, or you're exhausted? Will it also not be worth it then? You see, ultimately, I couldn't beat him with strength. I had to beat him by doing something he wasn't willing to do. And that's one thing that I love about sports. It's not just about talent. There's also a lot of times where it comes down to willingness. Are you willing to do something that other people could do, but they're just not willing to go through the pain or the damage to actually do it? That's something that I love about sports. But I would also offer that question to you in your life. Are you willing to put yourself in positions to make a difference or come through with people in a way that actually matters more than a game? What are you willing to do for something that actually really matters? Like helping hurting people, your community, your church. That's awesome. Great, that's hard. But what about when it really gets hard? Then how willing are you to really do it? You know, I remember one of the things that we would always encourage each other on would be sprints. And our strength coach, Mickey Marotti, would make us run stupid amount of sprints. We would do 40-40s, and we would do so many other things. And you had to make the decision. Am I willing to embrace this grind, suck? Because ultimately one day I know it's going to be worth it. You know, it's one of the things I love about sports. It's not always the most talented. It's not always the most gifted. That does matter. But so many times, it's the ones that are willing to wake up in February, March, and April and be just as willing that morning as they are when the championships in January 8th. And I love willingness. But I think also something special about sports that it teaches us is vision. Our book says for me, I was looking all over the country, and honestly, Florida really wasn't even an option, and they got rid of their coaching staff, and they brought in Urban and this new coaching staff, and every time we meet with them, it would be so interesting because they would paint this vision of, hey, if we get you, and we get Brandon, and we get Percy, and we get Carl, and we get these different players, you know what we would buy into that vision. See, for me, we were playing for the state championship, I think December 12th, my senior year in high school, and 3 days later, I had to make a decision and tell the world where I was going on ESPN, except the problem was I had no idea. And I had 5 finalists. There were Florida, Alabama, LSU, Michigan, and Southern Cal. And so afterwards, I sit down with my family, and make a long story short, I was like, okay, guys, tell me where I'm supposed to go. And we talked about it for a little while, and I was like, okay, well, I really like Alabama. I love their tradition and their passion. it's awesome. Maybe we can bring Alabama back. And I was like, I really like LSU. I love their passion, tradition. Fans are crazy. There's something unique about this staff at Florida. And plus, if I could play with all these guys, that would be special. And then I was like, well, USC, they're really good. But, man, when I went on my official visit and Reggie Bush, runs a 31-yard touchdown, flips in the end zone, there's like 6 fans standing up and doing this. I was like, I don't know if that's a passion tradition where I want to go. And I was like, all right, we can narrow at USC. And so we narrowed out Michigan. And so I had the Florida, LSU, and Alabama come in to the house for one more quick visit. And after they each came in, and I got to make a decision. It's the night before I got to tell the world. And I'm sitting there, and I was like, okay, I really like this about Florida. I really like this about Alabama. And then I was like, LSU, I really like them. And Jimbo Fisher was there, and I really liked him as the OC. And I was like, dang it, I really like LSU, but I feel like, make a long story short, I asked my dad, I said, Dad, I'm torn. I don't know where to go. Would you just tell me? And my dad looks at me and says, Timmy, we trust you. You're going to make a great decision. Well, thanks, but tell me where I'm supposed to go. Come on, this is fatherly advice. Tell me now. And I was like, fine, Dad. He wouldn't tell me. I was like, Mom, you tell me. And my dad's sitting right beside my dad, and she's rubbing his back, and she's like, I'm with your father, Fine. I was like, okay, my 4 older siblings, Christy, Katie, Robbie, Peter, you guys know me better than Mom and Dad. You tell me where I'm supposed to. Great decision. I said, what are you talking? And so my dad goes, calm down, Timmy, calm down. I was getting worked up. And he said, just go to your room, get on your knees, pray about it. In the morning, I'm sure God will put it on your heart exactly where you're supposed to go. I was like, that's good advice. That's good parenting. That's what I'm talking about. So I go to my room. I get on my knees. I pray about it. I wake up in the morning. I have no idea where I'm supposed to go. And I have to tell the world at 5 o'clock that afternoon where I'm going, and I am terrified. And I go out, sit by our lake with my dog, and I'm sitting out there praying all day, and I'm calling different pastors and coaches and wise counsel and asking them their advice, and everybody is saying the same thing. Timmy, we trust you. You're going to make a great decision. Just tell me a name. Give me a team, something. And I go inside, and it's about 3 o'clock, and I have to tell the world at 5 o'clock where I'm going to go. And I type out my speech, and at the end of my speech, I have next year I'll be playing football for the University of blank. And I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go up, and I'm going to go find my high school coach, Coach Craig Howard, who had such an impact on my life and is so much like a father figure to me. And I'm going to go find him, and he's going to tell me where I'm supposed to go. So I get up to the school about 4 o'clock, an hour beforehand, and the auditorium's already packed, and it's literally split in the middle, orange and blue, red and white, and it's packed. And so I go, it's been such a joy coaching you the last 3.5 years, and love you so much. You're like a son to me. And I tell you what, you're just going to make a great decision. You can't go wrong. I trust you. Coach, what are you talking about? Just tell me. Please tell me. And I was getting so mad. And he's like, I trust you. I got to go do something, And so he leaves. And now it's like 4:45. I got 15 minutes before I have to tell the world. And my parents finally get there. And I'm like, Dad, come here. And my dad comes to the back. And I'm freaking out. And Dad, would you just tell me? He's like, what? You don't know yet? You got to tell the world in a minute. I know. Would you just tell? What are your top priorities? So I go through all of them, and he said, go over your top priorities one more. And I said, well, number one, it's about the people. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, it's about the coaching staff. It's about my teammates. It's about the people first. I mean, we grew up huge Gator fans, but that has nothing to do with this, what's right for you. It's about the people. And he said, okay, I love it. That's great. I agree with it. But he said, what if it was just one person? Not everyone, just one person. What if you just looked at the coaches and you said, it's just one person? Who would you pick? And I said, well, I love Coach Shula at Alabama. We got such a close relationship, and I love him, and I've been close with him for a long time. And honestly, Alabama was leading for a long time, and probably both of us thought we were going to go there. I said, honestly, there's something about Coach Meyer, though. He said, what do you think it is? I said, I think it's the belief in the vision of everyone tells you what you can do. Hey, if you come here, but I think he actually believes it. See, he sees a picture and a vision of something that so special that could happen, and I think I think I would go with him. He said, okay, well, there you go. I said, all right, I'm going to the University of Florida. And so I pick up the phone to call Coach Shula to tell Coach Shula that I'm not going to Alabama because that's the right thing to do. And I pick up the phone and I'm talking to Coach Shula and I'm crying because I was very close with him, and it wasn't the only time that Alabama made me cry. Oh, that's funny. And so I said, Coach Shula, I'm just so sorry, but I'm going to go to Florida. And Coach Shula said, stop right there. I love you just as much now as if you came to Alabama. You're going to have a great career, and hopefully I get to coach you one day. And I hang up the phone, I look at my dad, and I said, that's the coach I'm supposed to play for. I just told him I'm going to Florida, and he said he loved me. And I was like, no, I'm going to go to Florida, I'm going to go to Florida. And so I called Coach Meyer, and he answers the phone, and he's so ADD, and he's all over the place, but he knows I'm making a decision in just a couple of minutes, and so he's nervous, and he's literally driving in his car because he can't sit still. And so he's like, hey, Teebs, and what's going on? I was like, I'm wiping off tears, and he doesn't know they're Alabama tears. And so I'm getting ready to tell him I'm coming to Florida, and his phone goes dead. It's a true story. And so I'm dialing it back, and it's going right to voicemail. And he was one of those Blackberries. I guess they're not around. And I'm dialing it back. And I was like, I'm not leaving a voicemail on a moment I've dreamed of my whole life, And so I'm like, whatever. So I put my phone in my pocket, and they're literally pushing me on stage on a bigger podium than this to walk out front to sit out there. And it's literally, they're counting down. It's like 4:58, and they're miking me up, and they're handing me this award for something, and they're counting down, and literally people are going back and forth, Roll Tide and Go Gators and all of this, and I'm sitting there, and as they're miking me up and they're counting it down, I literally go to my dad who's sitting right beside me. Dad, I didn't actually talk to Coach Meyer. I could still go to Alabama. and my dad's like, what? And it's funny is all the ESPN guys, it's not live, but they can all hear it through our mics, and they're like, what? And everybody's like, and so then they go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and they go live, and so I'm answering all the questions, but the whole time I'm not like actually in the moment of answering the questions. I'm really in the back of my head thinking, where am I gonna go? And it's going back and forth. And one of the things right at the last second where they said, next year, where will we be playing college football? I thought of the people and I thought of the vision. And I said, next year I'll be playing football at the University of Florida. I think in sports that's so important. You have a vision, you have a goal, you have a dream. But in doing that, something else that I learned in sports is you also have setbacks. And sometimes we view setbacks as the worst thing possible. And obviously they're disappointing. But how many blowouts do you actually remember? Not many, right? Your favorite team, what blowouts are you like? Dude, you remember that blowout game? You don't remember it. How many comebacks do you remember? A lot of them. You remember a lot of comebacks. How could you ever have a comeback without a setback? You can't. It's literally impossible. You have to have a setback to have a comeback. But when you're actually getting blown out, or you're losing, or you're disappointed, or you're hurt, and you have a setback, what if instead of saying, oh my gosh, I'm gonna sulk, and I'm gonna feel down, and I'm gonna feel guilty, and I'm gonna feel bad, and I'm gonna sit in this misery, I actually thought, instead of, oh my gosh, we're down 31-3, or oh my gosh, I can't play for this long, or oh my gosh, this sucks. Instead I thought, hey, what if we had the greatest comeback of all time? Because ultimately, how cool would that be? So with every setback, you have the chance to make it an incredible comeback. So a setback might not be the worst thing in your life. It actually might be one of the best things in your life. And I would have to say, I've had a couple of setbacks. But man, I think in my life, I've learned more, and God has taught me more in the setbacks in my life than any of the blowouts in my life. And I don't mean just in one game. I mean in seasons of life when it comes really easy. Sometimes you don't necessarily learn about a lot, but maybe you're in a time in your life where you just experience, you might learn the most in your life. I can think of one that we went through as our junior year, and we lost to Ole Miss, a game that we didn't think we should have lost. And honestly, most of that's my fault because I think I did a bad job as a leader that day. Bad job in our intentionality, bad job in our focus, and we lose to a team that had a great game and was a really good team, but honestly, I just don't think that we should have lost to. But why I think that was such a good thing for our team is because the next day we had a practice, and we don't usually practice the next day, and it was one of the most intense practices that I've ever been a part of in my entire life. And at the end of that practice, we knew we were going to win the national championship if we got a chance. Because that setback was so crucial to us regaining our focus, our inspiration, our drive, our willingness, because we remembered what it tasted like. And we don't want to experience that again. You know, I've experienced a lot of other setbacks in my life, like, getting cut multiple times. Or criticism. And shoot, I even remember this last year, one of the more recent ones, I thought, hey man, this is going to be so cool. I'm going to, this opportunity with the Jaguars. And so I get cut and I'm disappointed, obviously, and I go home, and my wife's so supportive and she's so sweet. But right around that time, almost at the exact same time, all the stuff in Afghanistan started to happen. And so I head up to our foundation offices, and we're working on it, and start planning and working on how to evacuate and support and help as many people as possible, especially so many that are literally in life and death situations. And not long after that, I had the opportunity to fly to the Middle East. And we're in multiple countries there in the Middle East where we're serving, and it was after we're in one of the countries serving and we're flying to a different country there in the Middle East and we're serving. It was the first time in a little while that I could honestly say, God, thank you for letting me get cut. Because you see what happened, if I wouldn't have been playing for the Jaguars at that moment, and then I wouldn't have been cut at that moment, I would have never had the opportunity to ultimately do what I think is one of the greatest callings, and maybe the greatest calling of my life, and especially in that moment to be in that place. Because if I never would have even signed with them, I would have had other things scheduled, planned, and I would have been doing. And so ultimately, what other people would look at and say, man, that was such a setback. And honestly, I felt like it. And probably couldn't even really be like, thank you, Lord, because I was pissed. Until I realized that setback was actually just setting me up for something that I was truly supposed to be doing and called to be doing. So maybe you're in a time in your life where you're experiencing setbacks, but maybe instead of sulking in that, you could be looking with vision and willingness in the future of how it's going to be a special comeback and what God can do in you and through you, because you're really just in the place you're supposed to be. Because then the last thing I would say today that I learned from sports is perspective. To ultimately put things into perspective. And that's not always easy for me, because sometimes I can be very competitive. That's just a little bit. Our senior year, our goal was to win another national championship, to win 3 out of 4, and ultimately something very few teams would have ever done. And so we literally would break it down to best ever. We had big goals and we didn't shy away from it. Our freshman year, we won a national championship. Sophomore year was blessed with the Heisman. Junior year, another national championship. Senior year, we wanted to be the best ever, win another national title. And that year we go 12-0, undefeated, number 1 in the country, defending national champs. And then we go to Atlanta for the SEC championship game and we lose to Alabama. And it was crushing. Still sometimes is. But it was crushing. And honestly, it wasn't just because we lost the game. For me, at that moment, it was more than a game. See, I let it also affect my identity of who I was. And that next weekend is the Home Depot Awards in Orlando, Florida, where they give out most of the college football awards there, and they announce the winners. And the night before the award show, there's a banquet similar to this, and a bunch of the players and sponsors are all in this, and we're sitting at one of the main tables up here, and they're bringing up the Alabama players and the Texas players and introducing them because they're going to play in the national championship. I'm just sitting out here watching it, just ready to puke. And I was in such a bad mood, such a bad place, so disappointed because it was all about me. And one of the waitresses comes and she taps me on the shoulder and she said, "Hey, Timmy, there's a really special young girl here. And her family have drove from Virginia, and we're in Orlando, Florida. She drove from Virginia to see you. Any chance you would mind walking to the back to say hey to her?" I said, "Of course." And I stand up and I walk to the back, and they open the doors, and in comes walking this young girl named Kelly Fonnen. Kelly Fonnen has had brain tumors and tremors and has overcome so much in her life. And they open these doors, and in comes walking this young girl that is so focused on getting to me and taking the next step, but it's so hard for her. Every time she takes a step, she is shaking and she's trying to keep her balance, and then she takes the next step and the next step and the next step. And she's so excited to get to me, and I finally get to her, and she gives me this huge hug, and she squeezes me, and she embraces me, and she squeezes me and embraces me and holds me and holds me. And then she starts crying, and then I start crying, and her family's right behind her, and then they're all crying, and my family was there, and they're all crying, and no one's even said a word yet, and everybody's crying. And then I start to talk to Kelly and hear a little bit about her story, what she's fought through, what she's overcome. And she starts to tell me, and I don't know why, I just felt it was on my heart to ask her to be my date the next night for the red carpet and the award ceremony, and she said yes. And so the next morning, my uncle took her out to get her a fancy dress and be the belle of the ball, and we went to dinner beforehand, and it was awesome. And then we go from dinner, and we pull up right to the red carpet, and we walk down the red carpet, and everybody's cheering for her, and it is the most amazing night. And then they walk us into this that huge auditorium room, and there's literally fancy seats, and we're literally seating row 1, seat 1, row 1, seat 2. And then her family's just a couple seats over, and my family's right behind me, and it's awesome, and we're having literally the best night. It has been incredible. And then the award show starts, and I believe that night I might have been up for 6 awards. And they announced the first award, and I lose. I was like, that's no problem. Tonight's about Kelly, we're good. Announce the second award, and I lose. It stings a little bit, it's fine, Third award, and I lose. Fourth award, and I lose. Fifth award, and I lose. I was like, all right, kind of getting a little upset now. And everything starts coming back from the disappointment of losing to Alabama, the disappointment of legacy, and the disappointment of the tradition, and the disappointment of trying to be the best ever, and the disappointment with your teammates, and the disappointment of everything that you've worked so hard for. And what happens is I'm sitting there, and bitterness is creeping in, and it's building, and jealousy and envy and all of these things, because what I'm saying is, I wish I could have what I don't have in the moment. And so something must have happened that's a mistake, because we should have won that. And I'm losing perspective. And then my mom, who's sitting behind me right before they announced the last award that I'm up for. What was she talking about? A silly college football award? I genuinely can't even tell you what it's for anymore. I don't even remember. But perspective, what ultimately mattered that night wasn't that award. I truly can't remember what it's for. But you know what? I'm still super close with Kelly, and Kelly has raised hundreds of thousands of dollars to help boys and girls that are going through exactly what she's going through. You see, I'm so grateful for Kelly that night because I didn't see or have the perspective that I should have. But Kelly helped me regain it. See, ultimately what matters, guys, sometimes is not what the world's going to tell us. And I'm not saying those things are wrong, but the world's going to tell you over and over again, the most important thing is how much money, how much fame, how much prestige, how many promotions. They're going to tell you, this is everything. And if you don't have it, you're not enough. And I'm going to tell you what happens if you have all of it. But that's all you have. What happens if all you do is win championships, but you never actually impact any people? What, are you just going to sit around with your rings by yourself? It's cool. You may have conversations I've had with different people who have been blessed to be super successful in different industries, and they call you late at night and they say, man, Timmy, I thought it was going to be more. I thought it was going to be more. See, I would encourage you guys to strive to be successful, to be willing, to go after it. But man, there also is something very, very much more important than success, and that's significance. And I think every single one of us, we have the chance to be successful, but more importantly, we have the chance to be significant. We can all take our success and we can turn it into significance. Because you know what success is about? It's about you. You know what significance is about? It's about other people. And the question is, are you willing to take every bit of success that you have for you and share that with other people and give it to other people so that you're not just successful, but you're significant because you have perspective on what really matters. It's not just about championship. What was that award that night? I don't know. But what mattered was Kelly. So thank you for making a difference in so many people's lives. But let's remember to keep that perspective because it's so easy to lose. Thank you guys so much for having me, and God bless you. Thank you guys. Thank you guys so much.